Okay, so today we are talking about spreadsheets on Concert Business Basics. I have a little bit of a migraine, which doesn't hurt my head, but kind of affects my vision. So if I'm not as excited about the spreadsheets as I normally would be, that's why. So I just wanted to let you know that. So today we're going to look at some good tips and tricks for spreadsheets. So hopefully you've seen the deals seminar that happened last week, where we talked about the versus deal and the promoter profit deal. So what we're going to do today is walk through a settlement sheet and see how those deals get put onto a spreadsheet, which will then give you the opportunity to be able to play around with those numbers and better understand how the deals function, and let the spreadsheet do a lot of that math for you. So we learned how to do it by hand, and now we're going to learn how to get it on a spreadsheet. So first up, I want to say, whenever possible, you should make your own spreadsheets and make your own formulas so that you have a really deep understanding of how the sheet is built and how it functions. Many times you're going to inherit spreadsheets from somebody else. Sometimes if I'm in that situation and they don't want me to change the format, I will simply go in and redo all of the formulas so that I know how it's been built and how it functions. And on that note, it's very important when you are working on a spreadsheet that you're going to send into a business manager or somebody else that's going to use that sheet as well. Understanding how they want to receive it can be very important. So there might be things that are happening behind the scenes that you're not aware of, that they have it formatted in a certain way so that they can copy and paste it into their accounting system, for instance. So I have, at least on one occasion, completely revamped a spreadsheet and sent it off and then been told, why did you do this? Now I can't cut and paste it in my system. So now I have learned that before I make any changes and overhaul a spreadsheet, I really want to understand, if I'm sending it to somebody else, what are they going to be doing with it and what's the functionality that they need. So that's an important thing when you're getting started. Keeping spreadsheets as simple as possible. You want to have it clean, easy to read. It needs to do the job that it's going to do, but don't get overly complicated. And really think about this kind of almost as a design project in addition to just the functionality. The way a spreadsheet looks and the way it can be read you're communicating information and telling a story. So making it easy for people to understand what information is on there is kind of a little bit of a design project. So taking a look at your formatting and making things really easy to see and understand. So why don't we dive into walking through a settlement sheet, and we'll do that first. And then there's a couple of other things that I'm going to show you. Excel versus Google Sheets. So I prefer Excel if I'm doing real tour accounting work. For really super basic spreadsheets, Google Sheets will work just fine. Excel has some additional functionality that if you're doing some more complex things, you might want. So Google Sheets is everybody uses that these days. So most of what you're going to do, especially if you're starting out, totally fine to do in Google Sheets. Always understand that if you're in whatever platform, if you're sharing a spreadsheet with someone, there is always the possibility that they are going to alter it, accidentally delete something, type over something, make changes that you didn't intend. So knowing that and knowing what you want people to do and what you want them to not do, you can lock certain cells, or you can make the sheet read only. But a lot of times, especially on the tour accounting front, when I've put together my settlement sheet, I don't share that sheet with the business manager usually until the end of the tour. What I do is, unless they need it, what I do on the daily basis is print out that settlement to a PDF and send the PDF. So sending things in a PDF format where it can't be altered, it can't be changed, it is formatted the way you want it to look, that's important in the presentation of the material. And that goes along with other things beyond spreadsheets too. So like resumes, for instance, you should never send a Word version of a resume, or like the document version that you could work on. You should always send a PDF. And that way you know that it is formatted and looks just perfect the way that you want it to look. So between Excel and Google, I think you can easily start out with Google. And if you need more functionality, move on to Excel. Obviously, there's a cost to purchasing that. Numbers, which comes with the Mac and is, I think, free with Apple products. I don't really recommend using Numbers if you are sharing that spreadsheet with somebody else. If they don't have Numbers, if they're using a PC, it just doesn't translate very well. So I find that even I have a Mac, and when people send me things in Numbers, like I can't open it, and it just becomes kind of tricky. So I would say stick with Google Sheets or Excel. The functionality across spreadsheets is pretty similar from one to another, but of course they're going to each have their little nuances. So, all right, we're going to dive into, we're going to do a Google Sheet. Oh, hold on. I'm going to need to share my screen, aren't I? Also, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I will be able to see in the chat. And Google Chrome. All right, so, I need to pull the chat back up. It's the Q&A. All right, sorry. I feel like every time I share my screen, I have to like rethink about how to position all of this stuff on my screen. I don't really need the participants, but where did the chat go? Chat, there we go. Okay. All right, so if you have questions, throw them in the chat. All right, so we're gonna look at a really basic settlement sheet on this Thursday. I will show you like a version of my warped tour settlement sheet, which is significantly more complex. It has a lot more information. I had some technical difficulties with my Excel. I had to get a new version of it, and then it locked me out and whatever. You don't want to hear all about that. Anyway, I don't have that for you today, but we'll look at that next week. So this is a really like scaled down, simple settlement sheet. One thing that is going to be consistent for pretty much all settlement sheets that you'll kind of ever see is there's going to be 4 main sections to them. So the first section is going to be the show information, the name of the artist, the date, the promoter, the venue, city, state. The weather, we note the weather a lot on here because it can kind of explain ticket sales on the day of the show. If it was, when we were doing the Warp Tour and it was 120 degrees in Phoenix and the heat warnings were all over the news and they all were saying, don't let your kids go outside, we did not see quite as much walk up day of show ticket sales in that situation. So noting what the weather can be, if there's a big snowstorm, that might affect your ticket sales. So that's why we put the weather on there. And then it's nice to, up in that show information, put the deal in as well, and we'll come back to this. So currently there's no information on this sheet. I mean, it's outlined, but I'm going to walk through the 4 sections, and then we'll talk about plugging in the formulas and information. So second section is going to be the box office. So your ticket sales, how many tickets did you sell? What is your gross box office receipts? Any deductions, taxes, and we'll arrive at a net box office receipts number. The drop count is back when there were hard tickets, you would rip them in half and drop them into a box, and somebody would take that box and count the number of tickets that were dropped, and it was the number of people that attended the show. So it didn't matter if it was a paid ticket or a comp ticket, it was the number of attendees at the show. And we'll come back to more details in that box office section. Show expenses. The third section is almost always show expenses. Usually you'll see the guarantees for headliner and support acts up top. We'll usually have a column for what was budgeted and then a place for the actual number, and then we can look at the difference between those. On Thursday, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of what each of these line items means and represents. We have Sean O'Connell from Live Nation Denver, who's one of my most favorite people to settle with. He's going to join me on Thursday, and we'll walk through the details on all of those. So show expenses. And then the final section is going to be our artist payment section. So this is where we'll really take what we learned in the deals workshop and be putting that into formulas to calculate so that it calculates itself. And I got a question, is there a link for the deals webinar? Yes, if you go to jenkellogg.com, all of the past workshops have the video embedded in the workshop, and there's all it's also on YouTube. So if you want to subscribe and like it and share it and all that, that'd be wonderful. All right, so heading back up to the top, I like to, depending on the situation, I like to color code things. And what I've done for you here is I've color coded anything that's going to be like typed in. I've coded as blue, and anything that's going to be a formula where we're going to start with an equal sign and we're going to tell Excel to do something, I've color coded those as green. So I wouldn't maybe necessarily normally have those, the color coding on a sheet, but I think it's, as we're talking about this, kind of helpful to see what's really happening. So show expenses, we'll do, or show record in the snow is my favorite fake band name, which my, at the time, 2-year-old child came up with when he was naming things after whatever he was looking at, and it was a snowy day. We'll say the date is today. The promoter will do Jan Productions, Chicago hometown. The weather, it's rainy. The venue, let's say this happening at the house, and let's keep it in Oak Park, Illinois. So in the deal section, I've got a place to put the amount of the guarantee. So let's say it's a $7,300 guarantee, and that you'll see is formatted with a $sign and a comma and a decimal point. If I go up here to the 1, 2, 3 formats, I've selected the accounting format for that. If I want a $sign, I'll select the accounting. If I don't want a $sign, because if it's a whole long row of numbers, we know it's dollars, I'll use the financial. So the reason that I choose those over currency or one of the others is it will line up the decimal points very accurately. And then if it has a $sign, it'll put it further over to the left of the cell. Okay, so we've got that in an accounting format. One of my favorite tips is to, especially if I'm making a sheet for somebody that somebody else is going to use, I want to force them to do certain things sometimes. So I want this to either say versus or plus, and I want it to say precisely versus and precisely plus. I don't want to have the opportunity for any typos because we're going to use that in a formula further down on the sheet. So what I'm going to do is a data validation, which says data validation. So in that cell that we were in, I want the criteria to be a list, but I'm going to put the list of items in here. So I want it either to say plus, or I want it to say versus, and I want those to show in a drop-down list in the cell. And you can either then show a warning, which if you typed in something else, it would say, this is not one of your choices, but it would still let you do it. Or you can do reject input, which will force it to select only the options that you've provided. So we are going to save that validation. And so now you can see there's a little arrow next to it. So now I can do that drop down. And if we have a plus deal, we can change that to a plus. So in this case, we're going to do a $7,300 guarantee plus we'll do 90% of the gross box office revenue after expenses and a 15% promoter fee. I have formatted that to be a percentage, but I don't really need it to, so I've selected percentage there. I don't really need it to have those decimal points. So I'm going to come up here where it can remove, oops, that added one on. So I'm going to just remove the decimal point. So it's just like a clean 90%. So that's the kind of stuff where like if, you know, it's fine to have it either way, but it just looks a little bit cleaner to take those decimal points out. Over here, I would really think that that would look prettier if it was lined up over on the side. So I'm going to do that. And these are the kind of little things that you just play around with and see how do you like it. You can see that I've used different size fonts, bold, grade shaded areas, and borders to visually define what's going on the sheet and make it really easy and clear to read. Okay, so that's our show information. Moving down to our box office. So this box office, you can set up your box office information in two ways. You can either have your ticket prices aligned for each ticket price, or you could transpose this whole thing and have a column for each ticket price. So on more complicated shows that have more ticket prices and have certain fees or different things included inconsistently across the ticket prices, I use the other format. So you'll see that on my Warped Tour sheet on Thursday. So for here, I'm just going to first go through and put in just some information so that when I do the formulas, you can kind of see what happens. So we have a line for each ticket price. We generally always start with the most expensive ticket price first and then go down to the cheapest. For the capacity, I'm just going to put in that there's 100 at each one. Unsold tickets are tickets that are available for sale but were not purchased. Kills are tickets that exist on the ticketing system but were never made available for sale. So if you've been to an arena show and you've noticed that behind the stage there's a whole bunch of seats, because in a basketball game there would be people sitting there, but there's nobody in those seats because you would not be able to see the stage. Those seats exist on the ticketing system, but they were killed and never made available for sale. So that is what a kill is. And then a comp is a complimentary ticket that is used for friends and family, marketing trades. Anytime you hear on the radio that you can win tickets to a show, those tickets have been given to the radio station by the promoter for free, to give away for free. And they are getting the radio time to talk about the show and give away the tickets in exchange for those free tickets. So those are comp tickets. I'm just going to first plug in all of the stuff that I'm going to put in blue. So facility fee is a per ticket fee that it originated as a historical restoration fee, where older buildings that needed to keep up their building more than new buildings would tack on a kind of a historical restoration fee. This kind of then became pretty consistent everywhere, that there was a, in addition to a rent expense that we'll see down below, that facilities would add on a facility maintenance fee or a facility fee of some kind. So that's a per ticket fee. We'll say that it's $1. Let's say there's some other like $2 per ticket fee. And let's say where we're at has a 5% amusement tax. So I put in that 5. It is not formatted for percentage, but I can come up here and I have the percentage up, so I can just click that. Now, if you have put in the number and then hit percentage, it's going to do what it just did, add on a whole bunch of decimal points. So it translates it by taking it times 100, right? So then we go back and put in the actual percentage that we want. Now we would have that formatted properly, so it would be, you don't have to redo that every single time. The drop count isn't going to factor into any formulas here, but let's just say that we had, I don't know, 150 people show up at the show. All right, so we're going to come back to the formulas. What we're going to put in the show expenses, like I said, we're going to get into all of those details on Thursday. So for now, I'm just going to put in an amount for the venue package. We'll just say it was $1,000, and we'll say that that was both for the budget and the actual. Typically, all of the expenses would be more itemized and broken down. And that's the stuff that I want to plug in now. All right, so we are back up at the box office. When you're creating a formula, you want to set it up not just for your current situation, but future potential situations. So to get our sold number, it's a formula, so we're going to start with an equal sign. That's the way that we tell Excel or any spreadsheet that the thing that's coming after it is not just text, but something that needs to be done. So we start with an equal. So the sold equals the capacity minus the unsold tickets minus the kills minus the comps. So in this case, we didn't have any unsold or comps in this particular line, but we still build that into the formula in case it turns out later on in the day, oh, we do have 5 comps. Now we can go plug that number in and it automatically updates and calculates for us. Also, when we are then copying, let's go over to total first. So our total gross revenue is going to be the number of sold tickets times the ticket price. So that is the total revenue for the tickets at that ticket price. So now we can take those two cells, and there's usually 3 ways to do things. There's a way to do it with a mouse. There's a way to do it up with a toolbar, with the menu bar. And then there's keyboard shortcuts. So any way you achieve these things is fine. I tend to like the keyboard shortcuts whenever possible. So I'm going to do Command C to copy those two cells that I selected. And I'm going to then highlight the two cells below that. And I want to paste special. I want to paste the formula only. So that'll keep the border formatting and the color shading formatting. And if we go into the formula bar, which is up at the top, and kind of click in there, we can see now the formula has copied down. So though that formula is a relative reference, when we created that in cell F11, while we said go to cell B11, subtract C11, subtract D11, and subtract E11, what we were actually saying was go to the cell that is 1, 2, 3, 4 cells to the left, and then subtract the cell that is 3 cells to the left, then subtract the one that is 2 cells to the left, then subtract the one that is 1 cell to the left. So then when we copy that formula, it still is relative to where you are pasting it. So we paste it in F12, and now you can see that it's grabbing the cell 4 cells to the left, which is on the 12 line. Okay, down at the bottom, we are going to want to do a sum equals sum, open parentheses, which is the way that we tell the formula this is we're going to sum up. There's a couple of different ways that you can sum things. You could go grab those individual cells, totally fine, but using the sum function and then giving it the range that you want it to add up, you put that range inside the parentheses. The thing that's nice about doing that is then, let's say we have a 4th ticket price that gets added on. So I'm going to insert a row. If we add on a 4th ticket at $15 and it has 50 available, because we used the sum function and didn't grab those individual cells, it will add, when you insert something in the middle, it still is going to sum up the entire range. So when you are doing a column like that, I would recommend using the sum function. So I'm actually going to Command Z undo that, or you could use, there's a little undo button up here. So we've got the sum for cell B14. Now I'm going to copy that, and and another way that you can copy that over is if you see that little thing in the corner, if you can get it turned into a plus sign and you just pull it, it will copy, oops, that wasn't supposed to be in there yet. It will copy that cell formula over to the other cells. This, when we are demonstrating that something is being summed up, we like to have a strong line underneath it. So I'm changing the border formatting to have that show as a strong line in there. Okay, when we're working through a formula, equations, it's nice to be able to visually see what's going to happen. So sometimes we will just replicate information from somewhere else so that it'll be in a nice, smooth column. So our gross box office receipts, we're just going to do equals this total of the totals, because that is the gross box office receipts. But we kind of want to move it over so everything that we do underneath it is going to be like a nice smooth column. So that's our gross box office receipts. The facility fee, because we put in it's $1 per ticket, we then need to calculate what is the total for all of the tickets. When we're doing something in a column like this, I like to visually represent if we are subtracting or adding. So I'm going to show this as a negative so that when we look at this, we can see that it is going to be subtracted from the gross box office receipts. So I'm going to do equals negative. I'm going to grab the cell that is the per ticket facility fee, do the times, which the asterisk is the, above the 8. That is how you do times in Excel. If you do an X, which I know when you learned math, like in elementary school, like you learn with an X, it won't understand that. Okay, so we've got the per ticket facility fee times the number of sold tickets. And then we've got the same thing below it where we've got the whatever other fee times the sold number of tickets. So now I can do an equals sum, and I can sum that range. Because those things are being shown as a negative, they will then subtract out. So that brings our taxable amount to $57.75. So amusement tax, totally different than sales tax. So, you know, if you go to Starbucks and buy a $2 coffee, or however much coffee costs, the menu says $2, and then say there's, 5% sales tax, or 10, there's probably 10% sales tax if you're in Chicago. That would then get added on top of the $2. So then you're paying $2.20 if it's a 10% sales tax. Concert tickets, when you go buy the ticket, if there is amusement tax, it is included in that ticket price. So if we equate that to the coffee example, the $2.20 that is the amount that you actually pay the cashier, that would be the ticket price if we were looking at it that way. So the $2.20 includes the amusement tax. So it's a completely different tax system. Like I said, in Chicago, sales tax is like 10%, amusement tax is like 4 or 5%. Counties sometimes have amusement tax, and it really varies significantly from place to place. So when you're settling a show, your local promoter will tell you what the amusement tax rate is. So most of the time, the way that we need to then calculate what is the amount of that tax is we know the $2.20 amount is the gross in the coffee example. We need to find out, and that's the known amount. We now need to use the tax rate to find out that $2 net amount. So while this looks like it's kind of out of order, the first thing that you're going to figure out before the total amount of the tax is the net box office receipts. So to do that, and I know that this is kind of like a little bit of a confusing calculation, you take the taxable amount divided by parentheses 1 plus the rate of the tax. And I promise you the algebraic proof would demonstrate that this is the reverse of having $2 on the menu for coffee and paying $2.20. So because we know the gross amount, we have to back into the net amount. So then we can either take the net times the amount of the tax, or we could subtract it from the gross. So if we take the net times the amount of the tax, that formatted funny. Let's change that format, and it's on financial. I wonder why that is. Oh, because it's centered. We want to have that lined up to the right. So you can see that, and we're going to show that as a negative because it does get subtracted out. So you can see 57.75 minus 275 would in fact equal 5,500, even though we kind of put those together in kind of a different order. All right, so that is the tax. And I will tell you that I have had more arguments at settlement over how to calculate the tax than I have had about anything else. And the one and only time that sometimes settlement there, you can like get in a little bit of heated arguments about things. The only time that on the Warped Tour for 9 years doing 40 to 45 shows every year, the only time I got into like a legit argument, standing up and yelling and pointing at the person I was settling with, we were arguing about how to calculate the tax. Turns out I was right, but yeah, so calculating the tax and understanding what is the local tax code, and if it does not specify that it should be multiplied, it will be divided in the way that we just showed. Okay, down in show expenses. So headliner guarantee. Because we put the guarantee amount up top, we ideally put things on a sheet one time and then always reference that one place. That way you don't have to remember to change the same number in more than one place. It cuts down on errors. and it just streamlines the whole process. So we are going to do an equal sign. We're going to scroll up, grab the amount of the guarantee. Oh, and actually I want to teach you guys about the if function in here first. So I'm going to delete that out. The deal that we are working here is a promoter profit or plus deal. Recall that in that deal, the guarantee does get included in the show expenses, but if it was a versus deal, it would not get included. So what I want it to do is I want it to decide, should we put the guarantee in the show expenses? The way that we're going to do that is with one of my favorite functions. It's called if. So you do if, open parentheses, and then there's going to be 3 sections to it. So you can see on here, the first section is the logical expression, which basically means you're going to make a statement. The second section, the sections are separated by commas, is the value you want it to return if that statement is true. And then after the next comma is the value to return if that statement is false. So we want to say if this cell equals the word plus, and this is why we wanted to make sure that it was the plus was typed correctly. So if that cell equals plus, comma, then I want it to return the amount of the guarantee. If it does not equal plus, if it's not a plus deal, then I want it to return nothing. And you show that by doing 2 quotation marks and then close parentheses. So in this case, it is evaluating if cell G5 says plus, then it will put in the guarantee because that is what needs to happen for that deal. So if we come up here and change it to a versus deal, if I did the formula right, like magic, it has evaluated that cell, determined that it does not say plus, and so it returned the value of nothing. So this is a way to build kind of some of the decision making into the sheet so that you don't have to remember to like, oh, it's a different kind of deal, I've got to go change this part of it. So the more that you can build in, if this happens, then do this, you're going to have like a really smooth functioning sheet. Okay, so I'm going to change this back to plus because that's what we're doing. And then for the guarantee headliner, the budget and the actual are going to be the same. So in this case, I'm just going to say it equals that. And then difference is I'm going to say the actual minus the budget. And that I'm going to then copy to all of the cells below. In this case, let's say the venue package ended up being 800. So this will then show we budgeted $1,000 for a venue package. It actually turned out to be $800, and so you can see that it came in $200 under budget. So that's where it's nice to have that difference column. It'll really be able to show you things that are inconsistent from the budget that maybe you want to ask some follow-up questions on or understand why it's so different than what was anticipated. These are just sums. So we're just going to sum up that entire column and then copy those formulas over so that we have our total show expenses for the budget, the actual, and the difference. And this, I want to have a bold line again, so I'm going to go choose bold and hit underline. Okay, moving down to artist payment. So I'm going to delete it had some formulas hidden in it. Okay, so we're going to go through the calculation for the artist payment. Because we have information that's related to that are on different parts of the sheet, I like to pull it all in so that we can really see in order what's happening. So first, our net box office receipts, we just want to pull that number down. So we want to do equals, scroll up to our net box office receipts amount, and we just select that cell. So that means whatever is going to show up in that cell up above will also show up down here. Total expenses, same thing. We're going to grab the actual total expenses cell. Promoter fee. So here I'm going to do an if. I'm going to say if this is a plus deal, which I think if that equals plus, Then I want it to put in 15%. That's our typical amount of the promoter profit fee. And that's something else that you could kind of like build a new little cell in. So if it is a plus deal, we want it to return a value of 15% in the cell. And if not, we want it to return nothing. So in this case, it was a promoter profit deal. So it's putting that 15% in. If I came up here and changed that to be a versus deal where there would not be that fee calculation, you can see now it's gone away. All right, so switching this back to a plus. So you'll recall the promoter fee is the show expenses, including the guarantee, times the rate of the promoter fee. So we're going to just take the cell that is straight up above our total expenses, because remember we do have our guarantee added into that, times the cell that has the percentage for the promoter fee. So our promoter, remember that on a versus deal, as money, or I'm sorry, a promoter profit deal, as revenue comes in, the guarantee gets paid out, the show expenses get paid out, and then if there is still revenue, the promoter keeps the next $1,215 in this case before there's anything left to share. So the split point equals that the show expenses plus the promoter fee is that point in revenue after which there's something to split. So our split point is $9,315. We subtract the split point from the net box office receipts to get that amount that is left to share. So we do equals net box office receipts minus split point is negative, because I was just making up numbers as we were going. But let's say the show didn't sell very well, is probably what happened there. So for the purposes of showing this example, I'm just going to come up here and make our capacity 1,000 so that we are playing around with numbers that are positive. Okay, so what's left to share is 36,000. The artist percentage, we noted that up at the top in our deal section. So we are just going to go up and grab that cell. And then we can calculate what is left to share times the artist percentage of what is left to share. So they're going to get 90% of what is left to share. Artist guarantee, I'm actually going to change this to green because we're going to link that to our guarantee cell up at the top. Okay, so now we need to calculate our total performance fee due to the artist. In the case of the plus deal, we know we're going to add those two things together. In the case of the versus deal, we would be comparing those two things and selecting the larger of the two. So we want to use an if function here for it to decide which calculation should it do. So equals if this plus cell equals plus, comma, what I want it to do in that case is, I feel like they put this right in the way. Okay, if it is a plus deal, if that is true, what I want it to do is artist percentage plus artist guarantee. Now, I have not actually done this formula, so hopefully it works, but I might have to like tweak something because it's been a long time since I've done this exact thing. If that is not, if G5 does not equal plus, which would mean it's a versus deal, then I would want it to compare the artist percentage amount with the artist guarantee amount and select the larger of the two. So this is an if function with inside an if function. So if it's a plus deal, do this, and if it's not a plus deal, we're going to do this other thing, which is equal to if the artist percentage is greater than the artist guarantee, we want it to return the percentage. And if it's not greater, we want it to return the guarantee. All right, fingers crossed, people. Error. See, that's what happens sometimes. And then you go figure out, why is there an error? Now, it is probably because I needed to put an equals sign where if G5 equals plus, I want it to do a formula, which is equals D66 plus D67. And I might have to put, nope, still errors. So now we're gonna see, maybe I need to put parentheses around there's a problem. Okay. So the problem is I have too many parentheses at the end, and we are not going to watch me do this live. So for now, apologies on that. Where do I want to go from there? Because I will be able to make this work, but not under the pressure of you all watching me. So I will come back to that on Thursday with the right answer for how to calculate that, but I promise you it is an if function with its inside an if function. If you don't want to deal with all of the if functions, you can always do this manually. So you can just do equals the artist percentage plus the artist guarantee. Total payment to the artist, $40,123. Sometimes after we've gotten that total performance fee due the artist, we have some things to subtract out to figure out how much to actually write the check for. So frequently in advance, a deposit of 10% of the guarantee is sent. So that would be $730 that would have already maybe been sent in advance. Sometimes there's a 50% deposit. It very much depends on what the agency requests of the promoter. Production reimbursement. So one of the show expenses is sound and lights. That is a show expense whether it's being rented locally or if the tour is carrying it. If the tour is carrying their own sound and lights, it's still a show expense, but it gets reimbursed to the tour. So that's where plus production reimbursement would be. Plus advertising, we're seeing more artists placing some of the national digital advertising. And that is still a show expense, even though the artist placed it. So rather than the promoter writing a check to a radio station, they are basically writing the check to the artist because the artist placed the digital advertising. So sometimes you reimburse for advertising, and sometimes you select to take some portion of the payment in cash. You might need it for per diems or for bus driver float to fill up the gas tank. So whatever might be needed there, let's say they take $1,000 in cash. So then our very last thing is just a sum to see from our total performance fee due artist, and then any of the adjustments, how much are we actually writing a check for? So Caleb, thank you for noting you can get rid of the equal sign in front of the D66 and second if, I think. Thank you for that tip. And I will double check on that, like I said, and let you know on Thursday. Other things you might want to add onto your settlement sheet is what was the promoter's profit, and in the end, there's the promoter fee, but any additional profit, a lot of times that'll be included on the sheet. And you'll kind of get going on a tour and discover you get maybe asked the same questions over and over. On Warped Tour, I was asked every single day, how did this show do last year? So I built a thing into the sheet so I could see last year's ticket sales. So stuff like that you might find helpful as you go. Now we want to take out all of the blue and leave just the formulas so that we have a nice clean template for all of the shows on the tour. The blue, remember, is the like the show specific things that you're typing in a number or a text, and those are going to be different every day. The things that are formulas, we can just leave those formulas in there. And now we have a really nice template where all the formulas exist, all of the situations should have been covered and addressed in the way that we built the formulas. So we can now take this sheet and either do a right click if you have that, or do a control click, which is what I do on my laptop, and you can duplicate it. So if you hit duplicate, now we have the exact same sheet, just a second version of it. So when you're getting prepared to start a tour and you're building your settlement sheet for that tour, because you're going to want to customize it by tour, usually depending on what's happening, you'll set up a template and keep a blank template, and then every day that you're going to settle a show, you just duplicate that template, and then maybe you double click it and say that this one is for Oak Park, or maybe you label it by the date. You're either going to label it by the date or the city. So that is kind of starting point on how to put together a settlement workbook. You're going to have a sheet for each show. I like to keep it all in the same file, and I'll show you why on Thursday. I'll create a summary sheet. Like I said, a lot of times I like to print things to a PDF rather than send something that can be fiddled with on my nightly reports. So you do print, however you do that. And I'm gonna have to move the Zoom things. So in Google Sheets, it automatically selects the current sheet. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna escape out of that. So what I wanna do is highlight the thing I actually wanna print. So I'm gonna highlight the selection. Then I'm gonna hit print. And now when in the print section, I can do selected cells. So I selected cells A1 through G76, so it'll print the selected cells. I'm gonna print it on, it's not going to a piece of paper, but I still want it to be letter size, because sometimes offices still do print out things and keep a hard copy in a show folder. So they're gonna be printing on letter size paper if they are. I do want it to be portrait oriented rather than landscape. Fit to height. So this is putting the entire sheet on one page. I actually want it to fit to the width. It'll print on 2 pages, and I don't really love that it kind of cuts off there, so I might play around with the margins or put in a hard page break in between the sections. You can adjust the margin size if you need to, and then when you click next, it will bring up you can either do print using system dialog, or you can do open PDF and preview. So I'm going to use print using system dialog because that's what I'm familiar with. And this is on the Mac. I don't know on the PC if you have this option. You didn't use to, but you might. So down here on the system dialog, I can do save as a PDF, and that would then print it to a PDF. So that is how I would then send the information into the agent and the business manager and whoever else wants it. How do we get it to show blank spaces instead of 0, 0 if it's an empty cell or not ready to calculate yet? So that's going to be in the number formatting. So in the case of like this artist percentage amount where it's showing as 0, 0, if you select a different kind of number format, not that one, maybe plain text, put it over there. We still want it to be a number, but there is somewhere in here where maybe it's automatic. And this is where on Excel, I would be able to tell you much more quickly. But there is some number formatting that would then display that as kind of usually a little dash so that you can see that there is something happening in the cell, even if it's not returning value. So I'm going to go back to that being financial. Let me just glance here at I want to make sure that I covered everything. So we talked about the if function, we talked about border shading and formatting for visual appeal. drop-down menus, validation we talked about, duplicating sheets we talked about. So conditional formatting, I'm going to pop over to Excel and show you a couple of things that are kind of special on Excel. So moving over there, duplicating sheets functions the same way. So you can do move or copy. We're in book 1, so we can put it before sheet 1. We click create a copy and then say okay. And so then you can see sheet 1 and the second sheet 1. So I'm actually going to move, or I'm going to make another copy. And this is just a list of show expenses because I want to demonstrate something else on here. You cannot do this in Google Sheets, but you can in Excel. So let's say you've got your list of show expenses or whatever list you're making. You've duplicated it across, duplicated the sheet. So you've got like your whole workbook set up. And then you discover we forgot to put a line item for security. So you can select all of the sheets that you want by holding down Shift. You see sheet 3 is selected, and hold down Shift, click the end of the range of the sheets, and now you can see both sheet 1. Oh, the Excel window isn't shared. Okay, well, I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to restart the share. Now you see my desktop. I don't want advanced sharing options. Now do you see my Excel? Somebody could tell me yes, that'd be awesome. Can you design a drop-down? Hi, Jay. Can you design a drop-down cell the same way in Excel? Yes, you can. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either create a list on a different tab or somewhere, and then you can just select that range if you wanted. So let's actually do that. And this is, I literally got this version of Excel today, so bear with me. I'm not entirely certain where everything is. We're going to be looking for validation. What is it? It's not in there. Probably in data. This is tricky to do with all of the like Zoom things on my screen at the same time. Data validation. Well, it's grayed out. I will look into why that did not function. I will get back to you on the Excel for that. Would you get rid of the green and blue when sending it to a venue or leave the colors? You know, I think that it really depends. Well, usually you're not going to be sending it to a venue. So if you're a venue, you're going to be creating your own sheet. If you're a tour accountant, you'll have your version of the sheet that you're going to be sending to the business manager. I would generally get rid of the blue and the green shading just to make it visually look better, because that's not important to them on what they're doing. And once you've created the sheet and worked with it, you'll have a really good feel for like, where are the formulas and where should you type stuff. I might actually just go with like a gray shading, something that's less colorful. But I wanted to show you the difference between those two things. So I would probably make some formatting adjustments there. You have 2 tabs highlighted, can only select data validation when you have 1. Oh, thank you, anonymous attendee. So yes, I have selected 2 tabs because I was showing you this other thing. So we've forgotten security. We want to insert security, but we want to put it in the right place across all of the sheets. And all of the sheets are the same. So I've selected the 2 sheets. Now, whatever I do on that sheet, I'm going to put, I want to insert a row above sound and lights, type security, and then I'm going to click on the sheet that wasn't selected. So you can, now I'm back on our sheet number 3. So that was the sheet that you saw me typing on. Security is now on there. I click over on sheet number 2. It is also on sheet number 2. So it inserted it in the same place on both of the sheets. Now, I did not have sheet 1 selected, so you can see it did not do it on there. We don't have that line inserted for security on there. So that is a great way that once you've created your really beautiful like settlement workbook that's got like 40 shows in it, and then you realize there's one thing that isn't quite right, that is a really efficient way to not have to go into every single sheet and update it. Okay, so those are the settlement sheet things that I want to show you. And then I just want to kind of touch on a few other kind of fun things that I have discovered to kind of streamline and make my life a little bit easier. So this is I'm gonna have to move this. Sorry, there's like, I need 3 screens to be able to see all the Zoom stuff and get it out of the way. Okay, so this is my band payment sheet that I use for the Warped Tour. Obviously, I've deleted out most of the relevant dollar amount information. What I've done is format this in a way that as people would come in to get paid, I could type the amount that they were getting paid. Let's say this band's getting $500. And it would have the reference number, the date, who's getting paid, what is it for, the city and the state, and who's signing for it, who's it received by. The reason I had this format in the way that I did was because then at the end of the day, I could take all of these payments and paste them into my cash sheet, which is in the same format. But when somebody is coming in to get paid, I'll put the dollar amount in there. I will then select the from the reference number to the received by. I created a keyboard shortcut to set a print area. So for me, that's I programmed that in as Command A, sets print area, and then I do print. And what I've done here is, it's probably hard to see. I'm going to save it as a PDF. What I've done is I've used the header and the footer to create a receipt. So hold on one second. So you can see, and I didn't even do this intentionally, apparently it's the Led Zeppelin font. So you can see that it's got, in the header, it has the word receipt. It's got all of the information that was on the spreadsheet here. And then it has a line for the person's signature. It's saying who it was received from, the company name, and from me. So when somebody would come in to get paid, I would print them out, two copies, one for them, one for me. And it alleviated handwriting receipts and then having to enter that information in. It simplifies it because I'm putting the number in one place and it's serving several purposes. So it's going to cut down on errors because you're not retyping numbers. So using the header and footer to create a different format than what you actually see on the sheet can be really helpful. Going back to Excel. So that's the thing I wanted to show you there. Another function that I really like. So reference numbers. If you are sending cash receipts in or whatever, you might need to create custom reference numbers. And the system that I came up with for that is the beginning of the reference number is always the show number. So in this case, it was show 39. The B represents that it was for band payments. I had other ones for bus driver floats or whatever. Runner receipts was R. And then just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whichever one it is. So this way, over the course of the tour, because I'm changing the show number, every single one of these reference numbers will generate a unique reference number. So I used a function that I actually had to look up how to pronounce this, and of course I have now forgotten. Concatenate maybe. So if you see up there the CONCATENATE, it's one of those things I use a ton, but I've never actually had a discussion about out loud before. What that does is tell it, grab these different things and combine it all in a particular order in one cell. So what it's doing is grabbing these cells over here and combining them into a new single cell with all of that information in one cell. So by doing that, and it's the same thing with the the date needed to be formatted a certain way when I was sending into the business manager. So if we were doing for today, the month is 5, the day is 19, the year is 20, we're in Oak Park, Illinois. I have a cell that has a period in it just so that it can grab that and insert that in the reference number. And let's say that this was show 89. So this is where, for myself, I created an orange code to show where I should be typing things in every day. So in the morning, I would just type those in for that particular day. And now it's customized my reference number for show 89. It's customized the date in the format that my business manager needed to receive it. It couldn't come in a date format. It had to have the date in a non-date format. It's put the city and state in there. And this alleviates having to update this in all of the entire, and now I don't have to copy and paste it all the way down. So that's where I could put it in one place and it updates throughout the entire sheet. This received by was pulling information from another sheet. So that's why it looks like that. Okay, so there's obviously, there was a lot more going on my band payment sheet, but these were kind of a few of the little tips that I wanted to show you on that. Another thing that you can do if you're paying out per diems, I would create that all on one spreadsheet and print out a normal, paper version for people to sign that they received it. But then I would change the print area to be able to print each particular line on a separate envelope. So the travel printers, you can print directly onto envelopes, and using things in Excel to be able to print on envelopes, and then all you have to do is change the print settings. So you can have the same information is coming out on an 8x10 sheet, and then you can change the print setting and have it come out on an envelope. That is what I wanted to tell you about that. Headers and footers we talked about, editing across sheets. Conditional formatting. So conditional formatting is one that you might want to use to remind you that you need to enter something into a cell, or remind if a condition exists. So for instance, if I'm doing shows with Live Nation, maybe there's something special that I have to do on Live Nation shows that I don't have to do for other promoters. So I'm going to pop back over to our settlement sheet for real quick and show you some conditional formatting. Moving that. So let's say, I don't know that this would ever necessarily be the case, but just so I have something to do. Let's say every time we do a Live Nation show, we know that there's going to be, I'm going to have to look extra closely at the comp number, let's say. So in promoter, I'm going to write Live Nation. In the comp cell, I am going to go in, and you go to format, conditional formatting. So you can apply it to a range or a particular cell, and it can format the cell if it is not empty. So if there's something in it, it can change the color. If the text contains a particular thing. So for this, you can do if it's greater than or less than. It's a way that you can change the color of the cell based on certain conditions. So if you want it to really be like, hey, notice me, you need to come do something about this cell, or something seems off because the number is greater than 1,000 or whatever. This is where you can give it rules, and it'll change the formatting based on that. So let's say text contains, you could probably even do equal that cell. I'm going to think about how I do this in Google Sheets. Well, I'm going to give a different example. So let's say if our sold number is more than 500, we want it to change the formatting so that we notice it. or if it is not empty. So in this case, cell F11, the rule is format the cells if it is not empty. So you see, because it's not empty, it has changed it to that like light blue, that teal colored formatting. I know I'm not giving the best example in this. I was planning on showing that to you on my work tour workbook. So we will revisit that one on Thursday. Band examples, print receipts, Google settlement. All right, we've hit most of the things. The one thing that I kind of don't, I kind of don't like when other people, and so I don't do it myself, on spreadsheets is you are able to rename cells. So I'm going to pop over to Excel over here. So where the name of this cell is T6, you could change the name to be like Bob or whatever you wanted to call it, that cell. Like if you wanted all the bands to have the band as the name of the cell. I find that when people change the names of the cells, it gets confusing to understand what they've done. So it might be helpful for a person who's making a sheet that's just for themselves. They might have reasons for changing the names of the cells, but just about every time I've received a spreadsheet that has had cell names changed, it ends up confusing on what the formula is doing, because I think that instead of using the common cell name of like T6, you actually have to type in like the new cell name. And so it can be hard to know where that cell is located if it has a different name that's different than its location. Any questions before we end for today? See things in the Q&A. Where did my chat go? When I changed the screen sharing, I'm going to stop the screen share so I can see the chat. Okay. All right, so no other questions. Well, I hope everybody got a couple of new tips and tricks, and really there's so many possibilities on how you can then look at what you need and think about how can I make this easy to read, easy for somebody else to use. How can I streamline this so I'm only putting a number in one place and then I'm tying to that number anywhere else. Making templates that are set up for any potential situation, and then like a settlement sheet, and then you've got your template built, you've got all your formulas built, you don't have to rebuild that every single time. Those are the big things I wanted you to take away. So I was just checking my notes there. So thank you guys so much for joining me. And on Thursday, we will have Sean O'Connell, which I'm very excited. We'll talk about show expenses, and I'll show you my warped settlement sheet, which you'll see has the same 4 sections, but a whole lot more information that I kept track of for that. So thank you very much, and you guys have a great night. Bye.